kind of scary sounding. Got him. Did I just kill a prone guy with that? No way. I'm going off. Okay, I tried. So hello gamers and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be showing you the top 10 highest recoil guns in Phantom Forces. Let's get right into it with number 10, the VSS Venturas. Regardless of what setup you put on this gun, it will always have a lot of recoil. However, you can make the recoil even worse on this gun, and it's pretty bad. The reason the VSS has so much recoil is basically just, it's an automatic DMR that does 99 headshot and can 2-shot torso at any range and 3-shot to limbs at any range, and it has 700 RPM. It would be a little bit too good if it could actually beam people with that kind of stats, even if it has 10 rounds. It's essentially just kind of an ECR upgrade in a lot of ways, like an ECR with a lot better ranged performance and ranges in general. And it also has way better multis, like a 1.7 headshot multi and a 1.2 torso, instead of a 1.1 torso and 1.4 head, which is pretty generic for a battle rifle. And this is actually good multis even for a DMR, but the recoil is very high. Keep in mind, I'm ranking these basically off of my experience with the guns, because some guns shoot really slow, so they don't really have a ton of recoil that's noticeable. But yeah, the VSS is one of the highest recoil guns on the game easily. But next up, we have the Foul Para Shorty, which might not necessarily have more recoil in general than the VSS. However, it can sustain higher recoil, as you can see, which is really cool. It has the same RPM as the VSS and does way less damage, but it has 20 rounds faster handling and reloads, and probably lower recoil all around. However, if you get a high recoil setup, it's going to have very high sustained recoil, which is why I'm giving it number 9. This gun is a little bit difficult to control in general, but since it can have a muzzle booster and a skeleton grip, it can have pretty bad recoil. So next up, we have the HK21, which not only has some of the most inconvenient recoil in the game, it also just has some of the most. This gun fires extremely fast, and not only does it fire very fast, it's also a 7.62x51, which is a very massive round. It's the same round that you can find in a Scar H, a G3, and even some bolt-action sniper rifles. This fires the same rounds as the Remington 700, so as such, it's going to have a lot of recoil. It can have even more when you use a proper or probably more of an improper setup. Ballistics tracker makes it very funny, but this is the default. Without ballistics tracker and with muzzle booster skeleton grip, it's all over the place. In fact, this is probably less controllable than nearly every other high recoil gun in the game because it's so RNG based. It's not very controllable because you kind of let it do its thing, and it will hit its shots eventually, because it has 100 rounds, but it's just got some of the most spread and overall just inaccuracy of any full auto gun in the game. However, for straight up recoil, especially vertically, it doesn't really have the most, but it's very much up there. So next up, we have a PDW known as the Vector. Everybody knows this gun has pretty low recoil actually. However, it has a bunch of recoil increasing attachments, which is 45 Super, Plus P, and 357 Sig. I think 357 Sig might be the worst of these three, and if you run remove stock, muzzle booster, and skeleton grip with this setup, it can have some pretty high recoil. This gun can be somewhat usable with this setup actually. Plus P is super annoying as well, but like you can use this setup. It probably has more vertical climb than the VSS does. It doesn't have as much spread as the HK21 does, but it's got more recoil. Like I'm pulling down massively here. It's mostly vertical as you can see, but it's a lot of vertical. It becomes pretty accurate after a bit, but like it goes up quite a bit. So yeah, that's why this is going to be higher up on the list than the HK21. I don't really recommend this setup all around. Don't use it. It's not really necessary. Next up is a shotgun known as the USAS-12. Now, the USAS-12 is an automatic shotgun. It is far and away higher recoil than any other shotgun in the entire game. The AA-12 is nothing compared to this. The reason for that is basically just it fires 100 RPM faster and has higher per shot recoil as well by a significant margin. So it's going to have this kind of recoil and that kind of spread. It doesn't really necessarily have the highest recoil in the game, but like per shot with the RPM, it's pretty high. However, it is a shotgun with a lot of spread. You can actually hit some stuff, sort of. Wait, I'm not even running a muzzle booster, I don't think, so this is not even the worst setup I could get on this. Oh yeah, I just realized ballistics tracker makes the recoil better in this case, because this is like significantly worse. What? Why would ballistics tracker make your recoil? But I guess it makes it like lean more to the right, which makes it more consistent to the right, I guess, which makes the recoil all around more consistent. This is a very high recoil gun. I don't recommend use this set especially, but like the gun in general is not really that great. The hits to kill are pretty trash, and if you're pretty good, the KSG and other shotguns are going to be better. But like, you can kill people with it. It is very easy to use. Lots of spread, awful per pellet damage, but it can actually one-shot if you're pretty close to a guy because of the spread. But as you can see, one tap. Pretty funny gun all around. Like, it's so easy to use. It is so brain dead easy. Okay, I'm out. Next up, we have a battle rifle known as the Beowulf ECR. Beowulf ECR is a very high recoil gun by default even. That has probably a little bit less recoil by default than the VSS. However, it can attach a muzzle booster, which makes it a lot higher recoil. As you can see, this is one of my favorite guns in the entire game. It's super fun. It has 10 rounds, lots of recoil, but extremely high damage. It has 780 RPM, the same as the M4A1. However, it does 52 damage. The M4A1 does 34, so it does about 20 more damage, allowing to actually 2-shot to the limbs to about 80 studs, 2-shot to the torso to about 100, maybe 110 to be honest. And while it does pretty awful damage at range, it drops off pretty hard down to a 4-shot kill, which is pretty much unusable if you're not tap firing it. It's really fun, but with this setup, it is awful. Even the VSS holds up damage a little bit better, which allows it to be a little bit better with its setup. However, this thing, that's my first kill with it. It's just not good. If you actually run a pretty decent setup of like stubby, compensator, and green or tri-laser, you can actually get some pretty insane recoil. I'm not saying it's the best in the game or anything, but because it can 2-tap to the limbs, if you're in close range, this setup will absolutely eviscerate people. And it takes quite a bit of skill to be very good with, because if you dump the full mag, you get like 2 extra seconds of reloading, because the empty reload kind of sucks, but the tac reload is very good. So basically, you can't really spray too much. As you can see, I fired 6 shots there, and that's really all you need to get a full kill. Like, you can kind of eviscerate people with this gun. But next up, we have the MAC-10, and the MAC-10 by default is pretty high recoil, but it can get some pretty crazy recoil because it's got plus P. By default, it doesn't even have a stock. It has skeleton grip, and best of all, muzzle booster. With all of this stuff, it has 1,177 RPM, and as you can see, it has some recoil. The reason I'm putting this so high up is because 30 rounds sustained recoil, and the initial, like, what is that initial kick? It is awful. Like, the per shot recoil is pretty bad. It's not like the worst in the game, but like, I can't even, hold on. Per shot recoil, pretty bad, not the worst in the game. However, since it fires so fast, so why does it have so much more recoil than a Vector? It fires the same round and shoots slower even with muzzle booster, and doesn't even have 357 SIG, and the reason for this is basically that the Vector actually in real life has a patented Super V recoil reduction system. It basically means the bolt when you fire recedes into the magazine, and for some reason that lowers recoil by a lot, especially in this game, because the Vector in real life has some recoil. The Vector in this game, it doesn't. Even with plus P, 357 SIG, it doesn't have a lot of recoil, even with a very high recoil setup. Next up though, we have the highest per shot recoil in the entire game with the M107. It has not only 216 RPM, but like per shot recoil is that. Like, it is insane how much recoil this gun has. The trick with it is basically just to aim out every single time, and you can actually get like pretty consistent around like 60 RPM from the gun, which is very good, higher than a lot of bolt actions, and it can torso kill at any range. It can't in close range, which is why people hate this gun now, except it's still really good. I'll just show you the recoil with like Coyote. It is a lot. This could go for highest recoil in the game because per shot it has highest recoil in the game, but there are guns that are kind of less accurate, and it's kind of crazy to say that because this gun is not accurate at all. However, there are 2 guns that actually do probably more than what this does. Our first one is a gun known as the Colt SMG 633, which by default is a very high recoil gun. It's mostly vertical, but even with this setup, it's mostly vertical. However, this has probably some of the most recoil increasing attachments in the entire game, having 4 attachments that heavily increase your recoil. First, muzzle booster, second, skeleton grip, second to last, you got remove stock, and very last, you have either plus P or 50 GI, and funnily enough, plus P actually gives you more recoil than 50 GI because 50 GI now lowers your RPM, and plus P recoil is just absolutely abysmal. Like, the default recoil is pretty bad, but it's not that bad. So 50 GI will probably give you slightly more recoil per shot, but since you fire slower, it doesn't have as much recoil. Also, it only has 14 rounds, so it's not as fun to use. I don't even know what this... I'm playing on the main game, and I've never seen this map before. What? This map is called Office. I think it's new. It's just small, but they changed the name? Oh, I got one. When I die, I really hope people pick up my gun because it's one of the best guns in the game. Whoa. I think it actually doesn't have too bad... The hipfire is pretty good. Actually, what? Here's the secret. Buy this setup, right? Then only use hipfire. Then when people pick it up, they'll only use aiming, because most people only use aiming and never use hipfire, and then you win. I'm surprised this is actually that good in hipfire. Like, it is not bad in hipfire. What? I heard that skeleton grip doesn't really make your hipfire that much better anymore, but apparently it kind of does. It's very good. High recoil guns have this phenomenon where sometimes they actually just don't have any recoil the second you hipfire them, and this actually suffers from that. Not suffers, because it's way better that way, but it is pretty interesting. Like, I'm having to pull down so much, it's impossible. After the, like, initial spray, I can actually pull down. Kind of scary sounding. Got him. Did I just kill a prone guy with that? No way. I'm going off. Okay, I tried. That is definitely going to be the intro clip. That was such a good clip. It shows off everything. It shows off the high recoil gun, what I'm going to be talking about in the video. It spoils one of the ones, but it's a very cool intro, so I'm going to use it. You probably guessed our final gun. It is the M231. However, it's with this setup: muzzle booster, skeleton grip, wire stock, which actually increases the recoil for some reason. It does nothing else. And either default or M855. Default has the more vertical recoil, I guess. So it goes up. It initially goes up, right? Like straight up, and then it does that. Holy, I almost, no, that was a 32 damage shot. Okay, then we got M855, which adds quite a bit of just random spread to your gun. Not only does it add actual spread where your bullet won't land exactly where you're looking, it also just makes the recoil this. It used to not do this. I think they kind of fixed it a little bit more, because before you had some more all over the place, but as you can see, that is definitely the least accurate gun in the game. Like, you can't even argue with that, because, you know, the Colt SMG, at least it's got, like, mostly vertical recoil. This just, like, not good at anything, you know? Oh, almost got it. Does wire stock actually help now? No, it's making it worse. Yeah, this isn't as good. Easily the highest recoil gun in the game. If you guys did enjoy, though, that is the top 10 highest recoil guns in the game. But I will see you guys in the next one. Oh, almost got 2. Peace.